you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Woman of Faith podcast. We are, I don't know, we're halfway into this season, or honestly, I don't know, I've kind of lost track. But this has been such a great season so far. If you missed last week's episode, I was in conversation with Martha Palmer. She is an author and mother of six boys, and her story was so incredibly powerful. She talked about her struggles with depression, anxiety, almost dying on the operating table when she was giving birth to her last son. It was just such an incredibly poignant conversation, inspiring, and also, um, I think for me, it really just highlighted God's goodness and His grace over us. So if you missed it, if you didn't, for whatever reason you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to kind of go back after this episode and give it a listen, and then make sure you head over, to Martha's page, follow her, offer her some words of encouragement, or maybe leave her some feedback on how what the episode kind of did for you. I know for me, it's always there's always something special when I get to have conversations with other women, with other believers, and I get to listen to their stories. If you have been following me for a while, then you know I am a writer. And so storytelling has always been central to anything and everything that I do, which is, part of the reason that I started this podcast, because I wanted to um, elevate and spotlight the stories of others while also sharing my own story and sharing my own life and my own journey, which I have done through books, through this podcast, on my social media. I'm pretty much an open book in that way. But the reason that I say that is so often we're like in our own little bubble, in our own world, and it's easy for us to believe when we're going through something, especially hard times or challenges. It's easy for us to believe that we're in it alone, or that we're the only ones that have ever experienced that. I know for me, through some of my most challenging times in my life, there were moments of shame attached to certain experiences that I was having. There were moments of loneliness when I did feel like I was alone because no one in my immediate circle could relate to what I was going through. And so sometimes when we share our stories in this way, we never know who's listening and who's going to resonate with what we're saying. And that's why for this season, I wanted to be more intentional with interviewing women and bringing them on to share their stories, because each one of us, you, me, your girlfriend, your sister, your mom, your abuela, cousins, right? All of us, we have stories that can inspire another woman. And so I guess that is the purpose and the goal with this podcast. Like I have no, I have hosted a number of podcasts. It started with the Empowerment Hour back in 2017. And then that shifted into the Nancy Ruffin show. And then it kind of evolved into the Woman of Faith podcast, because as I continue to evolve in my own life and my own journey, the things that I'm doing are also going to evolve. And so I encourage you to embrace whatever season you are in right now in your life. You do not have to be tethered or anchored to an old version of yourself. You at any moment can let go and release things that you feel are no longer serving you in your present experience or where you see yourself moving in the future. I think that society does a bad job in trying to pigeonhole us into a certain box, into a certain title, into certain specific work, just maybe because that's what we might be known for. It might be what we're really good at. But listen, we were not meant to stay the same. We were meant to evolve and to grow. And hopefully, through those processes, we're also transforming. We're becoming something completely different. And if you don't allow yourself to grow without feeling guilty about it, without explaining it to others, you are uh, preventing yourself from transforming into who God ultimately has created you to be, right? Because every next level of who we become requires us to be in the season or in the level that we're at right now. Like you can't get to the next level without being in this level. So every season of our lives has a purpose. So I just kind of wanted to preface or to kind of begin this week's podcast with that because this week I am going to be in conversation with a woman who I highly respect. She is someone who I consider a friend. She is a fierce advocate for women's empowerment, for diversity, for equity and inclusion. And listen, I know that we are in a time when those very things are being attacked. But this is a woman who has, at least in the time that I've known her, dedicated her life to making sure that women are seen, that they are elevated, that they are empowered, whether it's through her corporate job or whether it's through her public service, on the board that she sits on. All of the work that she does is really centered on community and uplifting, the people in our community. She's also a dedicated mother, and she is a proud Latina. And I think, I don't want to say above all, because I think all of the roles that she holds are super important. But the fact that she's also a fierce woman of God, I know is why she is as powerful as she is in the other areas of her life because she knows who's at the center of her life. She knows who she is and whose she is. So this week, I will be sitting with my good friend, Monica Castaño, to talk about her life, to talk about the values that ground her, the impact that she's making in her community and in her career in the workplace. And I promise that you are going to leave inspired, encouraged, and reminded of the power of living boldly in your purpose and what that looks like as you navigate, the twists and turns and peaks and valleys of life. So when I return, I will be back with Monica and we will get right into this week's conversation. Hello, Monica.
Hola, how are you?
I'm good, honey. How are you? So good
Good,
to
good,
see you.
good. Good to see you too. Thank you so much for
So
having me.
I'm so happy you said yes. People always freak out when I ask them, if they want to be on the podcast because they think it's going to be whatever. But I always say, listen, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a conversation. I never want for it to feel like an interview because then it gets boring. So I've already introduced you prior to this, but I really love for my guests to introduce themselves, right? And so the question I always ask is, who is Monica? Right? I know what your titles are, right? I know what you do, but if we were to strip Monica of the titles, right, of leader, mom, philanthropist, community builder, all the things that you're known for doing, we take that away. right? And I ask you, who is Monica? How would you answer that question?
So good question. You're gonna take off running from the door, huh?
Yes,
If I
well, one of the things I want you to consider when you answer that is that so often we forge our identities
Mhm.
around these titles, right? And if we're not careful, we can become so attached to these titles, and then the minute we're not that thing, we don't know who we are, right? And so I want not just you, but I want whoever's listening, or whoever's watching to really like unpack that and to think about who they are aside from the things that they're doing, because when God created us, yeah, he created us for a specific purpose, but our identity was never supposed to be rooted in the things that we do. So with that in mind, right, who's Monica?
So, it's funny that this is the first question because that is one of my biggest hurdles in life is who am I stripped down aside from all the things that I have worked to be, right? And
Mm.
it's something that I would probably say in 2018, 19, I had to have a real like hard conversation with myself because it's something that I struggle with, and I was looking for her
Right.
in all the wrong places. Either throwing myself into work or throwing myself into this and throwing myself into that. And for a lot of us mothers, we do that later on because for so long we're mom first, foremost, and everything,
Yeah.
right? So for me, it's hard. It's something that to this one, because yes, all the titles are there, and what you're doing here, I have a really hard time seeing myself the way people see me. That's not who I
Hmm.
identify with. It's not who I see myself as. It's very humbling. I love it, but it's something that I struggle with. And then also in my quiet time, when it's not work, when it's not mom, when it's not giving back to my community, it's like, who are you? Like, who are you? I can say this, I'm learning to be a lot gentler to myself, to
Hmm.
talk to myself a lot more nicer, to
Yeah.
realize that, I'm someone that has a good heart and a good person, and try to build on that because anything else is too overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
And it's still a struggle for me to
I
identify
love
as else.
I love that you're so honest in that response, because I don't think this is a question that we necessarily focus on. Like whenever we meet new people, whenever we're introduced, like people are like we're always um asked like, well, what do you do, right? Like you go to any networking event, right? Like, what do you do, or like, what's the purpose? And so I think we become just so that becomes so ingrained in us that it almost becomes a robotic response, and that's something that we normally really think about. But I want to challenge people to think about that, because we are so much more than the things that we do. And I know that we see so many, I'll take just celebrities for example. We see these people that work all their lives for to reach a certain level of fame, a certain level, financially, and they get to wherever they dreamed of being for themselves, and yet they're missing something. Many of them are not happy. Many of them suffer from depression, anxiety, all of these things. We see it with like some of our most beloved icons. We saw it with Michael Jackson, Robin Williams, Whitney Houston. Like these are all people that have like turned to, I don't know about Robin Williams, but we know about Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston. They were turning to, drugs and other things to help them just navigate through life. And I think sometimes it's the pressure of having to live up to these titles, right? That we don't give ourselves permission to really not be these things. And so I wanted you to just kind of share that, because I think it's important for everyone who's watching to understand, like, we are not the things that we do. And yes, it's great to do great work and to have these achievements. But at the end of the day, really, when you think about, when you're older, and you're sitting maybe in your casita in Puerto Rico, right, on a rocking chair, maybe with your great grandkids, and you think back on your life, like, what are the things you hope you would be remembered for? It's not going to be your achievement, the plaques that you earned, or the car that you drove, or where you lived, right? Like, so for you, what would some of those things be?
I think for me, I would like to be remembered as someone who was good-hearted and someone that inspired someone. Anyone, right? And it doesn't have to be in a grand gesture. It doesn't have to be, you know, I'm always so humbled when I speak to like the young girls at school and they're like, oh my God, like, I loved what you said. And would you like to mentor me? Because I know that I sparked something in someone that resonated with them because of the we're relatable, right?
Yeah.
They saw young Monica in them, right? And for me, that really is it. Just being a good person. Like I struggle, like I said, because I struggle with the way people view me, when I hear it, it's almost like, oh, guys, don't like it's not that big of a deal. And I'm really
Yeah.
trying to work on like, no, it is a big deal, right? Like really focus on that if you touch
Yeah.
someone, it's a big deal.
So good. So I want to talk a little bit about, like, your background, um, and how your upbringing shaped the woman that you are today. So can you talk a little bit about, I don't know, maybe where you were raised, what it was like growing up in the environment that you grew up in, and how, if at all, that has shaped who you have become, and all of the work that you do? Because I feel like so much of who we end up becoming is a result of our experiences and the things that we saw when we were growing up.
So yeah, I come from a Puerto Rican dad and a Costa Rican mom. And for a long time in their marriage. We grew up, I always say we were very sheltered children, right? So my
Yeah.
parents raised us in Irvington, New Jersey until my dad, I want to say till I was like about 14 years old. They always had a lot of issues in their marriage. My mom was a young mom. She was 16 when she got pregnant with me. And back then, like my father comes from a strict Catholic upbringing. So you got pregnant, you got married.
To get
So
married.
needless to
Yeah.
say that, mommy wasn't always the happiest in her marriage, and as a child, you don't understand that. As a grown woman, you look at
Yeah.
it through a totally different lens. And for a long time, we were very sheltered children. Although they had a lot of issues with their marriage, we, owned a house, we had a pool. It was amazing. At 14, my father decided that he couldn't anymore and left us.
But before we kind of lost Monica, she was telling us that her father left at 14, and then it was kind of like the getting the rug pulled up from under you, right?
Right. Right. So, for sheltered children to be uprooted, taken out of where they, are safe haven, you want to say, sort of. I always say that, the streets were very welcoming. They were
Mm.
very, you know, you have a bunch of naive children coming into a new environment, and it was very easily to get swept up in those environments. For me and my siblings, dad was out of the house. Mom, for the first time ever, had to actually go work. to
Mm,
help support us. So we had a
right,
lot of free time, and those streets were not always very kind to us when it came to
right,
how we were raised. And I have to say, as far as how did that shape me, I would say that my biggest turning point was when I finally got pregnant at 18 and had Brianna, because be up to that, um I was a shell, like literally a shell of the
mm,
girl that I was when I moved to Elizabeth. The partner that I was with at the time, and the way that I ended up in that relationship, it just wasn't a good time for me at that point.
right,
Bree was really like a turning point of like, all right, what are you doing here? You're raising a daughter now. And if you stay in this situation, and continue down this path, like my biggest fear was that I would have a daughter one day that would turn around and look at me and be like, you were a weak person. And why did you
wow,
stay in this situation? And furthermore, that I would raise her to believe that that was the life that she also deserved. Because if I put up with it,
wow,
like if it was good enough for my
right,
mother, like why would I think that I deserved any better? And
wow,
that really took a lot. At 18, you don't really know yet, but I knew that I had this little girl, and
yeah.
like, things have to change for me.
And so I think I'm like in awe really because when I think about 18, um, you don't have a lot of wisdom at 18, but yet you did. Like the average 18-year-old doesn't, but you somehow understood at that age that if you wanted to have a different life and if you wanted to set a different example for your daughter, that you would be the one that would have to do it, that it wasn't enough to just stay in your situation because it was comfortable or because it was familiar. Like you had to have some courage and bravery to one understand, all right, I don't want this for myself, but then to actually act on it. And so what what was that experience like for you? Like recognizing that if you were to leave, right now you're going to be a single mom at 18 or however old you were when that you made that decision. Can you talk a little bit about that and then how that experience also contributed to the woman that you are? Because I know this Monica. I know the Monica who is strong, right? You're not, when I look at you, I don't see a weak woman. I see a strong woman. I see someone who is resilient. I see someone who makes it happen no matter what, like by any means necessary. So how did your experience with Brianna at that age, what did you have to, I guess, find within yourself to move forward? Because I feel like so many women, even though they know what they have to do, don't do it for whatever reason, but you did.
You don't do it out of fear of the unknown, is why you don't do it. You stay. It's almost like know the devil that I have versus the one that I'm going
Yeah.
into, right? um so my father is strict Catholic. We grew up strict Catholic, and to the point that my godfather was a priest, a Catholic priest. And I think for me, it's always been in my breaking. Like that has always been something that has grounded me, was the early learnings of God and knowing that there's something bigger out there. And no matter how many times I strayed away, like at my breaking point, like that's who I pleaded to, because who else do you plead to, right? Like at
Right.
that point, like what else do you know? So with Bree and being 18, it was being at that breaking point. I didn't leave right away financially. Bree's dad supported us, and there was a huge age difference between us. At the time that we met, I was 15, he was in his 20s. There was a lot of things that then I didn't realize, but a lot of just replacing my dad in someone else, right, to protect me, take care
Yeah.
of me, all of those things, right? And at the time, he fed right into it, and played up those parts. But with that came a lot of losing my self control, being controlled, a lot of domestic issues, the domestic violent issues. And at my breaking point, I remember we had gone into this huge fight and I had Bree. And I said, in my mind, I was like, if I give her to him, like, it'll stop. Like, everything will just stop. Like, if I say, here's your daughter, like, and I don't
Right.
want anything to do with you or her, um, maybe all this stuff that I'm going through. And I always laugh because I say I have a hard time saying that God speaks to me, right? Like, God never speaks to me in that way. And I've come to realize that whenever I've gotten to those points, I always feel like when I'm about to surrender in a way that's not according to what God's plan is for me, I always get struck by like a little, always say it's like I'm being electrocuted. And it's
Hmm.
always in those moments. Like, I remember pushing that stroller and thinking that, and it was almost like immediate, like a little electrocution. And it was like, no, like, what are you talking about? Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um, again, I sat and I thought about all the things that I needed to do with myself. At the time, it's so funny how things work. He's like, you need to go to school. I also dropped out at 18 because I had Bree. And he's like, you need to go to school. The life that I'm living is very unpredictable. And if something happens to me, no one's gonna come, help you raise Brianna. Like, you need to do something.
Right.
And sure enough, I took him up on that offer because he offered to pay for me to go to school, and I started doing that.
Right.
And then, little by little, when you are in a situation that's so dark and you can't see the light, but now you start, like, it's like Bambi, right? You start walking on the
Mm.
wobbly legs of yours, and you're
Yes.
like, wait a minute, this feels different. And ironically enough, he did, go to prison. And during those 4 years that he was in prison, when I say what emerged from that situation, like, I knew that there was no way, no way in hell I was going back. I knew that I
Wow.
wanted him to be an amazing dad. I did know I love my dad, like my father. I absolutely love him. And I knew that I wanted that for Brianna. And I was
Right.
like, if I stay, she will never have that from her dad. So, 2 weeks, I planned everything out. I was like, all right, he's in prison. I'm going to move into his house where I don't have to pay any rent, bank all my money. And 2 weeks before he was due to be released, I left. Like, just was like, bye, I'm out. And
Wow.
that was that was shocking for him. But again, by then I wasn't Bambi just trying to stand up. I had grown a lot in four
Wow.
years by myself.
Yes.
I had my family and I had support, but it was like, nope, you're moving on your own and you're getting a job. And, that was a big thing. But that lesson, the resilience and what everybody sees of a strong woman, it was that lesson of never allowing myself to get so broken to that point that my livelihood and who I am is reliant on another human being. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
And I mean, your daughter is like a young woman now. And I know that the two of you are really close. How initially you said you never wanted her to see you as weak, right? And so if someone was to ask Brianna, like, describe your mom, what do you think she would say?
I sat on a panel yesterday, and one of the questions was, "What's your superpower?" And I asked her, and she was like, "You say the hard things.
Mm,
Um, you say the hard things to motivate people and to make them better, and you're an advocate for women and minorities." I think that Bree, you know, how do you in fostering a relationship with her father, right? We have an amazing co-parenting relationship. And that's been years of hard work. And the two of us being intentional of like, Bree comes first. Like, whatever's going on with us, it's Bree. And
right,
how do you tell your daughter, right? Like around the age of 13, 14, when she starts wondering, like, you guys do this so well. Like, why aren't you together? Still be truthful to her, because I don't want to lie, right? I don't want to say
right.
he was amazing and it was just me. So being honest with her about the things that me and her father went through and the things that I went through with him, but yet giving her her response to me was like, "I believe you. I know that it happened. I'm proud of you, right, for leaving.
Wow.
Um, but also that's not my dad." And that right there to me was everything. The fact that we did such a good job that she doesn't even recognize the man that I'm describing to her
Right.
because of the relationship that she has with him. So I would say that Brie would say, I'm courageous and strong. She does not view me as weak. And that was always my fear, right? That that
I
would be
love
what she
that.
would tell me.
I love, love, love that. Um, and I mean, yeah, you absolutely are probably one of the strongest people that I know.
Mhm.
Um, and I think one of the things that we connect on a lot is how, we are focused on women empowerment, on really giving back. And I see that you do so much of that even through your professional career. And so I want to talk a little bit about like your leadership. Did you always know you wanted to be a leader? Do you feel like you always had that in you, or did that develop over time?
Um, being the oldest of three kids, I would say that being a leader was
It was
definitely in me
natural.
since, yeah, since I was a kid, right? Um, but no, I mean, think about what I just told you. When I entered the workforce, I was a 19-year-old girl out of necessity, right? So, and I entered into the medical field then. I remember my first job was at a urologist office, and the doctor didn't even want me in the rooms with his patients because he's like, she's a kid. Like, these are
Wow.
older
Yeah.
men, and they don't like, no, she's a kid.
Yeah.
And the God honest truth. And he it was just, not something that came naturally to me, but I was a quick learner. The hustle and the grit that I had, you outperform a lot of people when your back is up against the wall and you need to get things done,
Yeah.
right? When you're raised a certain way, you have a certain hustle. And again, I didn't have the formal education to back me, but I knew I had work ethic and I knew I can get things done. So as I quickly started to just maneuver and learn the workforce, fall in love with the medical field because that was always a passion of mine. And really just focus on where is it that I wanted to go. Even that was a struggle in the beginning because your community doesn't understand you wanting more, right?
Mm.
Not everyone always understands that. They're
Yes.
in the struggle with you. So I remember the first time I told mommy, I think I want to go back to school. And she clear as day, I can still hear her. "Ay, mija, why? You make good money. You have a good job." And to her, a good money and a good job was $15 an hour. But as long as I
Yeah.
can support myself and breathe, she didn't see the need. And I
Wow. Yeah.
think about that. I think about how many young girls have that and just don't have it in them to know, like, no, I can do more.
Yes.
Because that was something that, regardless of what, I knew I can do more. I knew that the community, although I love and raise, and it's the reason why I give back so much and always
Mhm.
remember where I come from, I knew that that wasn't it for me. Like, there's no way. God didn't put me here and this is it for me, you know.
Right.
So leadership, later on became something that I'm like, I can do this, I can lead a team, I got this, because sometimes you're so taken back by not being the smartest person in the room, but you don't have to be the smartest. You just have to know what you're doing and do it well.
Yeah. And you have to be smart enough to know what you don't know. I always say this, and you hire your weaknesses. Like you know what your strengths are, and you bring
Yes.
that, right? And then where you're not so strong, you just hire people that can fill that gap for you. And I think that that really is so much about what leadership is. And I think it kind of I think there's this false narrative, or maybe it's just what we've been conditioned to believe about leadership. So many people tie that to being in power and being in authority, but you can have power and you can be in authority, and no one is going to want to follow you
Hmm.
anywhere. right? They'll do what you say and what you ask simply because you have the power and the authority, but it's not because they want to, it's not because they respect you. And I think that that really is what differentiates like great leaders from those who
Mhm,
are just in positions of power. And this idea that leadership is um this role on the table of organization, right? It's not where you fall on the TO, but it's how people look to you. Like, can you inspire? Can you influence? Do you have impact? Right? And are you the person that people go to when they need direction or guidance? Because you could have the one that's in the authority position, but nobody's looking or going to them because they don't respect them, they don't trust them, right? And I think I love that you said it was something that you kind of always had. I think part of leadership is I think you can have it and you're born with it, but I also believe it's something that can be cultivated in someone. You know,
mhm.
there used to always be this saying when I was growing up, or I used to hear all the time, like that leaders are born. But I think it's partially true. I think some people have that natural, ability,
Naturally.
but I also believe that you can cultivate a really strong leader, something that can be nurtured through time. What are your thoughts about that?
No, I totally agree because the leader you were just or the power, that's not sustainable. Like if you look at that,
Yeah.
they have people on their team. I say it all the time. Like one of the things that I'm grateful for is that I am confident now in the leader that I am now. Like I say it all the time. I'm grateful for the team that I have, and I've changed my team multiple times, right? And that doesn't mean that I haven't made mistakes and that,
Right.
there's things that I don't look back at and be like, oh, you know, but I say it all the time. Like I can tell my team, let's jump off this cliff. And no one says no. Everybody's like, what time? Where are we going? And I see it in my organization where people are like, oh, but you do this. Oh, but you're so inspired. How do you get them on board? And I'm like, yeah, I'm confident in my leadership style now, right? Because to your point, the reason why you're struggling over there and you're asking me, how do I get my team on board? It's not because I'm over here cracking the whip all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that that doesn't come with the role, right? Because at times it's like, hey, like this is serious and we need to get it together. But it comes from a lot of the nurturing that you have to do to a team, right? These are human beings. I say it all the time. Like, I'm running a business. I absolutely am. But I'm not running it with robots. I'm running it with human
Right.
beings. And if I don't take the time to invest in them, they're not going to invest in me either. And for a lot of people, I think they forget that their team members, like it makes or breaks your team.
Absolutely.
Like absolutely 110%. It's important. It's important to foster those relationships.
Do you think that being a mother and understanding what it takes to like nurture a child and take care of another person um, has helped you become a better leader? Do you see any similarities between like raising children and then like managing and building up a team?
I do. I see it in the you want better for the people on your team. That's another thing that I think that a lot of leaders struggle with. I've been fortunate enough to
And
watch a lot of my team.
I just want to interrupt there because you want better for the people on your team, right? That
Yes.
is not always the case
Yes.
in other situations. I want to
Mhm.
add that and be clear because I think that that's what separates the great leaders from the ones that are not so great.
Right. So I was just about to say I've been fortunate enough to watch members of my team get promoted, move on to roles that they actually love and want to be in. And a lot of bosses, I'll say, versus leader, because that's a difference too, right? Someone who
Right.
identifies as a boss versus a leader. To lead a team, you have to have a specific skill set and you have to be intentional. A boss is just coming to do their job and tell you what to do. you know
Yeah.
so a lot of bosses, don't like that. It's like, oh, if I lose such and such, then what am I going to do? I'm not worried about losing anybody. I'm not worried about anybody getting promoted because I know that I built this team. I can build another one and continue to
Girl,
build
yeah,
another one. you know,
absolutely.
Again, it's in that confidence, but that mothering part is that, a big I only have three, but I hear from everyone that every child is different, right? I think about me and my siblings, and all three of us are different. What we want from mommy is all different, right? Our relationship with her is all different. So it's the same for my team. How I manage A is not how I manage B. How I bring them all together may be the same, but how I individually develop and manage is extremely different. And it does
Yeah,
require a lot of different levels of me too, because everybody's at a different career progression also. So
yeah.
absolutely, the mom in me definitely comes out a lot.
I love that. It's so funny because because like this is why I love to just have these organic conversations because none of this was planned. All of these questions have just come organically from what we're talking about because I don't hardly ever talk about leadership really on the podcast. But you know what? I think this is the direction that God wants us to go in. I mean, I know that there are women who are leaders and who might be struggling in their own leadership because I feel like a lot of times we are expected to fit a certain mold of what leadership looks like, especially for women. And so knowing you and knowing how proud you are to be a woman, to be a Latina, to be a woman of God, right? How do you integrate your faith, your Latinidad, and also, being a woman into your leadership style? Like, do you believe that those things are what help you be the exceptional leader that you are?
Absolutely. One of the things as leaders that we forget too is that we have to seek out what feeds us. So, you've have obviously been around me now for some time, and you know that there's a lot of projects that I'm like, this fed my soul, right? I have to be fed in order to continue to feed, the
Right,
team that comes behind me. And I think that a lot of times we leave that part out. And when it comes to, I work in corporate America, being a minority and being a female, it's tough here, and I work. Although my frontline team is predominantly minorities and women, from my level up, it's all male dominated and white males. um
right,
and the ones that aren't white have just joined that, boys club. So it's very
right,
hard. I remember sitting in boardrooms for a long time where it was like, oh, just, like, look pretty but don't talk,
mm,
and little by little I was like, no, I have a lot to say. You guys don't do my job, I'm the one who does it. We're
right,
gonna, really effectively run this territory. It's my territory. Why am I listening to somebody else tell me how to run it or what they
right,
think is better for my team? Like, you haven't even come out to meet half of these people. They don't know you guys by name. But for us as leaders, and especially women, we are nurturers and givers by, birthright at this point, I feel like. And we don't do enough to pour back into ourselves. How we met, it was the same thing at like 2023, 2022. I want to say I was in a slump and I didn't like the leader that I was. I just didn't like it. I wasn't motivated, I wasn't motivating, none of it. I had depleted everything that I had for myself. And I remember I brought on Angelique to do International Women's Day type of workshop because I'm like, I still have to do something for the girls.
right.
And she did such a great job. And she's like, hey, we have this thing going on. I think you should come. And I looked and I asked my boss, I was like, you know what? I think this would be great for, like, development. It was the mind, body, and spirit event.
Yeah,
And I was like, I think this would be great for development. But inside, I was going through something just myself, right? And
that's
like, the way that I felt. And I have a strong support system. I have great friendships. My family is very loving and supporting, and it wasn't enough. Something was off
Mm,
and missing in me. And I remember going to the event and just walking into that room, being so inspired by what was happening in that space, right? But it was like almost like the blinders went off, and it's like like these are your people, like this is where you need to be. And at that time, that's what I thought it was, right? So fast forward, I see you come up and you're doing the introduction for Bible study. And I'm like, okay, like, let me reach out to her, see how much this is. This is something that I really want to do. And you were like, nope, it's nothing, blah, blah, blah. And it was the Proverb Women 31. And I was like, oh
yes.
my God, I have it on my vision board for like the past 3 years already. Like, you got to be kidding me. I sent you a picture and you were like, I don't believe in coincidence. And I have to say that for me now, I realize now that that was the bigger picture,
Yeah.
what I was missing that was going to help me be a better leader and all the other things, a better mom, and just feel better from where I was that connection back to God.
Mm,
And he, I always say, like, he meets you where you're at. He knew that,
yep.
like, it wasn't going to be okay, let me come to God all on my own, but it was going to be through my work with empowering women that he was going to like wheel me back in, which he's
Yep.
done many of other times before, but I constantly kept going off. And I remember when I was struggling one time and I went to speak to my godfather, and he's like, focus on your relationship with God and not church and community. That will come to you, but focus on your relationship with God, Monica. Like, that's the one that you have to constantly keep going to. And, I can say that, like, he was right, because church was, the idea of church kept me away for so long. Because in the Catholic Church, you have to be this way. You can't have kids out of wedlock. You can't. I was so the poster child, not for a Catholic girl that grew up Catholic, right?
Right.
That kept me in like shame almost for a long time of like, I can't have this relationship with God because I'm literally the poster child of what not to do. But when he said that, and then years later finding this community that led me to you and to where we are, like, it has changed my relationship so much. And back to the leadership question, even that, like, I now take classes that are like, okay, spiritually aligned leadership, so that I can also, because in the work that we do, right, we work for corporate America, we have to do what's right for the business and also what's right for your people. And there's a thin line there for a long
Yeah.
time, and it eats at your soul, for those of us who care and really want to lead people, that eats at your soul. So, even that, finding, courses or workshops that are like, faith led to leadership has really helped me a lot when it comes to how I want to lead this team going forward.
You said so much, and but I really,
Sorry.
I no, no, no. I love it because I think what you said, and I want to reiterate to anyone listening, is that God meets us where we are.
Mhm,
That we don't have to fit like the perfect image of what we believe or what we've been conditioned to
mhm,
believe that we have to look like or be like or act like in order to have a relationship with God. And for those of us who call ourselves followers of Christ, the very basis of our faith is that Christ, put himself on the cross for our sins. So he's already taken on all of our imperfection, whatever
mhm,
that is. And all he wants is our yes to come back to him, broken the way that we are, messed up, disobedient, confused,
mhm,
right? Because you can be confused about everything. God just wants you to initiate a relationship with him, and then you let him take it from there. And I
mhm.
think this is like a perfect segue, really. I don't even know where we're going, but I feel led to talk a little bit about like the Christianity that we're seeing right now in America. And I'm not going to talk specifics or any of that, but a lot of the current events that have been happening have had me question if I am even like a quote unquote like right Christian, because what we're seeing some of these Christian leaders talk about, with Christianity, where I'm seeing some pastors support certain individuals
Mm.
who, though they call themselves followers of Christ, were not bearing the fruit of Christ, the fruit of the Spirit. You're not, when what we say and what we do is not in alignment with who I know Jesus to be, is like, am I the one that is like, am I the problem? Like,
Mhm.
that is where I have been. And I don't know about you, but like, I have been even like lately more in my Bible, because I have to remind myself of who Jesus is, and not what certain spiritual leaders are saying. I don't know, do you have any thoughts on some of the stuff that we're experiencing? I know for me it's been a tough past couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. You struggle with that every day when it comes to your walk with God, right? And that's a big part of that is the fact that the Bible and, scripture can be manipulated to suit whoever is preaching it to you,
Yeah,
right? Right? So
yeah,
that's why now more than ever your walk with God is important. It's super important, right? Because there's a lot being said, a lot being fed to people intentionally to rip this country apart. And
yeah,
I have a problem when people do that and hide behind the Bible. And I'm like, nope, pull it up. Tell me where it says that. Tell me where it
yeah,
says that. I also have a problem with people who say only God can judge me, but your whole sermon, your whole conversation with me is judgy as hell. Like,
yes,
I,
yes,
I
husband.
can't, I cannot do it. I cannot do it. And also know your audience, right? You if you run a church, and I'm not saying that you can't, because I also, where I struggle and I'm like, God, give me the ability to see someone else's point of view, right? I don't want to have blinders either, because that's not fair.
Right,
Everyone has their belief system. So give me the ability to capture you in that point of view, where it's like, Monica, open
right,
your eyes here. This is where I'm here. But also for a lot of our leaders, have some self-awareness and know your audience.
yeah,
Um, I sit through sermons sometimes at church, then I'm like, are you looking out into your audience, the people that are supporting you at church? Like, did you
yeah,
pray to God to give you those were the words he gave you for this group of people? You
right,
know,
yes,
and it's okay to have a belief. I recently, did it like walked out, but it's like not walked out. It was just more like there was a way to deliver that message about no one should be killed, right? Murder shouldn't be something we glorify. We shouldn't be dancing on nobody's grave. There was a way to
right,
say that without forcefully trying to convince me that this person was no.
great,
Yeah,
great.
yeah. I'm sorry. It's sad. It's a sad situation. Absolutely. Humanity is something that I'm like, where is humanity?
That's the question I have too.
Where the
Like,
hell
I
is humanity lately? Like, what is happening to people that we're normalizing that this is okay? And
Yeah,
in our opening night of the book of the Deuteronomy, when I told you, like, I'm struggling with God's people right now. I'm telling you right now, I've been struggling with God's people,
yeah,
and the chosen ones, because how
uh,
with what's happening in parts of these world, like, there's no way. I don't ever want to believe that my God or Jesus said, like, I understand why that's happening there, it just has to happen that way. I don't believe that.
it's so hard. It's so true, because even as much as, we study the Bible, like, we do see in the Bible God's wrath. Like this, like, our I think that we fail to recognize that we have a God that is Jesus, that, humbled himself, that emptied himself of all his glory, to take on, the identity of man, but we also have an all powerful God who will drown the whole damn earth and start all over again.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that sometimes we forget that. And that is the part that for me is hard to wrap my head around, because I'm also trying to reconcile the person of Jesus and the person who gave his life for all of humanity so that we could live in eternity. But the Bible is clear, like, there are going to be some who are going to get left behind. I
Mhm.
don't want to be the one that gets left behind. That's why I'm so confused about just about like everything that's going on, because I want to be on the right side,
Mhm.
right? And this is like what you said. This is why our own personal walk is so important.
Mhm.
Like, it's great to have spiritual leaders that we can look up to, that can kind of help us understand what that walk is. But we have to do our own work. You have
Mhm.
to get in the Bible. You have to study it. You have to understand, in the times that this was written, what was happening culturally. Like this morning, I was reading um, Colossians chapter 3, and it was talking about finding like the peace of God within you. And I was like, well, what did this mean in the context of when this was written? And when it was written, um the culturally, peace, when they were talking about peace, it was like you kept peace through the military, you kept peace through whatever was happening, politically in the time. And what Paul was talking about was countercultural to what was happening, that the way he
Mhm.
was talking was radical and just what we would seem as, we would deem as weird. And he was talking about loving our neighbor and taking care of each other and looking at everyone um, as a child of Christ versus this hierarchy of the time, which was free citizens, slaves, husbands, wives, right? And so, based on that hierarchy, was like how you were treated. Your identity
Mhm.
and worth was based on those. But Paul was saying, no, God wants us to all look at each other as a child of God. And so for me, like even now when I'm looking and I'm questioning what's happening, it's like, all right, how can I be different from what's happening, in culture? In any case, this conversation went all over the place. We went from leadership to to God. But I want to kind of bring it back a little bit.
Mhm.
And so, how do you make sure that you stay centered in God and all of the different roles and responsibilities that you have as a leader, as someone who pours so much back into the community, as a mom, a sister, a friend, how do you make sure that in all of that you are staying focused on Christ and on his purpose for you?
Um, Again, it's something that you have to work on intentionally every day. I struggle with the consistency of seeking him all the time. Life happens. I'm also a huge, like, when I'm feeling off, I tend to isolate, which I've identified, and I'm like, nope, get up, you're gonna go out. I think most more recently is noticing that I'm shifting or, drawing back from my day-to-day conversations with him. And when I'm feeling that way, one of the things that, I'm grateful for is to have when I can't muster up enough to pray for myself, to say like,
Mm.
hey God, guys, like I need prayer, and identifying that earlier on
Yeah.
than later. Back again, 2018, 2019, Monica would have probably drowned before she ever asked, right? But that comes with having that safe environment where you feel like I can come to people And there are people in my life that will help me through this. He purposely placed people in my life to help me through these
Mm,
times, to remind me that I don't have to see these, highs and lows by myself. They're there to celebrate the highs, but boy, are they super there to pick me up during the
yeah.
lows immediately, too. It's like immediate.
And that's so important, right? To make sure that you're surrounded in that way. Because one of the things that we know, and I know for me, I'm a person like I have to be in community. And it's so weird because I feel like at my core, I'm an introvert because I love to be at home. I love to just have my alone time. But then I also need community. Like I need to be with other people. It's where I thrive. And I think it's why
Mhm.
like I do so much of the things that I do because I'm always looking for different ways to eat, to be in community, to share community. Um for you, how would you, I guess, describe yourself? Are you someone who thrives in that community space or somebody who prefers to be, on the outskirts kind of by yourself and having that alone time?
It's a balance for both. Anyone who you mentioned Robin Williams earlier, and you
Yeah.
know, that was someone who everyone was like, oh my God, I love him. And he has this great life and all these things, and he's so amazing. And tragically, passed away the way that he did. I kind of get that now. When people say, oh my God, like how? I do such a good job, right? So in community, I thrive when it comes to like giving back. But so much of me in those spaces, right? Because I'm so intentional about what I do, the planning, how it all works out, showing up for everybody, holding space for everybody at these events, at these, part whatever it is, whether we're talking, however it is that we're showing up for our community, takes so much, right? The pre-planning and all the things after, that I found myself as the years went on more and more retreating, and almost sometimes showing up and it feels fake to me, not because I don't love it,
Mm,
but because I don't
right,
always show up at 100% Monica, right? I'm not always feeling
right.
100%. And so I get it now. I get when people say, but how? And I'm like, you know what? I understand, because there's times that I'm in rooms and no one will ever know unless I start asking, like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
struggling a little bit with something, right? So for me, it's a little bit of both. It's also identifying that when I am pushed to that limit, take the time to rest and recuperate, Monica, focus on what's wrong, pray, or surround yourself with the smaller circle. Like my family is something that really centers me. Coming out with you, Louisa, like, the women that really uplift me, and just being able to take that time for myself, and also knowing when I just need to retreat, because that's a big one for us. We don't take a lot of time for ourselves, because God forbid the world's gonna stop if we, God forbid, take
Yeah,
time for ourselves. And that's such a pressure that we add on ourselves. Like we literally
right.
only
So
add that to
true.
ourselves. Nobody's saying that. So it's a little bit of both. Like you, I also feel that there's times when I am feeling low, like Monica, get out there, because I thrive in those environments too.
Yeah.
But I would say it's a balance of both.
What would you say, like just knowing the trajectory of your life, knowing your journey and like the common threads that have been a part of your becoming. What do you believe is your God given purpose? Like
Ooh.
the thing that ties it all together.
Um, I guess my God-given purpose is to be the light in someone's life. Darkness followed me for a long time. And it showed up, I don't want to cry now. It has shown up in times when people thought she has it all together.
Mm,
I do such a good job of hiding a lot of my stuff, that unless I really am open and vulnerable to people, you wouldn't know. So when I say be the light, whenever I see that, right? When I see someone at work that started so not knowing what they wanted to do, and I'm able to create a path for them and see them evolve and see them grow, and they come back and they're like, oh my God, thank you, like you don't understand the role that you played in getting me here. Seeing my daughter and how the woman that she's become, I posted something the other day that said I didn't only get a daughter, I got a second chance to heal the little girl in me
Mm.
and raise the woman in her. And that is so spot on, so spot on. So I would say that that is my God-given purpose, is to be the light to someone that's in that darkness, because I didn't see a way out in a lot of those times. But, fast forward and here I am, and I'm like, God, to think that I never saw myself here, never saw myself
Wow.
leaving those situations. Like, it was the end of the world for me in so many of those dark moments. And like, no, it really wasn't. It really was not. They were lessons. They were sharpening, you know, fine tuning me to be able to stand in places and around people and be like, trust me when I tell you, like, he's not done with you. This isn't the end for you. And there's always another side. When you come out of the fear and the dark places, like you're gonna look back and not even remember who that person was.
That that's such a great answer, and you answered my last question, so I don't even have to ask it. Because really what I was gonna say is, like, what advice or what encouragement would you give, a young woman that found herself in the position that you were in at 18, young mom, in a relationship that was not the best for you or the healthiest, and like, how do you encourage someone to keep going when they feel like they're in the dark and there's no light or no pathway for them?
I often, and I share this with other people, I don't talk a lot about my domestic violence because we've done such a good job of what we present now. And I never want to leave a young girl with the impression that if it worked out for her, I don't
Yes.
ever want to do that. I want to be very clear that it worked out for me, thank God, right? But it worked out for me because of a lot of work. I had to leave. I had to make myself whole. I had to, trust that my daughter was going to be in good hands when I, delivered her to her father. I had to build myself up from the ground. That young broken girl didn't cultivate a good co-parenting life. The woman that emerged from that did that, right? And
Yeah.
I can't take all the credit myself either. He also sought help, bettered himself, started going to church, but all those things,
He
some
had
people
to do
can look
his
at it and
homework,
some
right? He
people
had
can
to do
look
his
at it and say
homework.
we're the unicorns, right? We're not what
Yes.
happens. But I want to be intentional that if you do find yourself in those spaces, like, make sure your safety and your well-being is always front and center. But for the girls that are in those dark places, like, there is light. Look for it. We're too busy focused on the obstacle. Don't focus on the obstacle. This is my problem now. How use the analogy of, like, you have this big boulder and you're so like, how am I going to get around it? How am I going to get around? And if you just happen to focus, you can walk right around it. And a lot of us, I did it alone. I did it without, I have community and but I didn't have a blueprint. My mom wasn't here saying, no aguante eso, come home. That wasn't what happened in my life. I didn't go
Right.
home to my mom.
Right.
We didn't have that. So even in your darkest time, you know, believe in yourself that you deserve better than what you're currently in. Like, that was the one thing that never left me, was like, this is not my life. This
You
cannot
know,
be
I
my life.
I think about everything that you've said, and I think about your response to your God-given purpose, and I think really what it was for you is that you became the light that you needed. You became your own light. And I think sometimes we're searching outside of ourselves
Mhm.
for something, and really God is just waiting for us to step into what He has already implanted in us. And we all have that light. It just, you have to dig. Sometimes some of us have to dig a little bit deeper
Mhm.
to get to it. But I think, Monica, you are the perfect example of that. So
Wow.
thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your heart, and just being so transparent and vulnerable. Like the questions that I asked were not even the questions I had prepared, which is always like that when I have conversations with my friends, because it should be an organic conversation, and so much of it is really just my curiosity of wanting to know more. So thank you for just being such an incredible light in my own life,
Thank
and in
you.
this world. And to my listeners, I hope that you have been encouraged. I hope that you have been inspired to pursue whatever it is that you have in
Mhm.
your own life. Pursue your purpose, whatever it is, whatever direction God is steering you towards. Don't be afraid to take that first step.
Mhm.
So thank